Today's artist is old school, original, and a straight up classic. A unique, fresh take on rap in the time. He rose to prominence with Dougie Fresh and the Get Fresh crew in the mid-80s. He's one of the very first artists to sign to Def Jam Records, and his music has been sampled over 1,000 times by music industry giants like Eminem, Beyonce, Mariah, Nas, TLC, Kanye, and more. If you haven't worked it out yet, today we are going to be talking about the man known as Slick Rick. What up guys, Ali here and welcome to Ali Talks Music. Add me on Instagram at Ali Talks Music as well. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Now let's get into the video. Slick Rick was born around 1965 in England to Jamaican parents.
Well, I was born in England. I came over here in like 76. Everybody was into hip hop, you know.
When he was just 18 months old, he was struck in the eye by glass from a broken window that left him blind on the right side and eventually led to him wearing his signature eye patch whenever he was performing.
And I just love your jazzy ways, yo. Answering my love is here to stay.
I used to wear like a contact lens, anything that camouflaged the eyes, cause you know, the eyes is kind of messed up, you know? Gradually I just started wearing. I was wearing Ray-Bans for a while. Then after a while I just said, I'm just gonna wear the patch. When he was around 11 years old, his family relocated to the USA, settling in the Bronx. While attending a specialized high school of music and art, where he majored in visual art, Rick met Dana Dane, and the two became fast friends.
He was an established artist. He put me on, so he helped develop my step where I'm at now.
They formed a hip-hop group called Kangol Crew, and they wore Kangol flat caps with suit jackets as part of their signature style. They performed in school contests, battle raps, parks, and small local clubs.
Have you ever seen a show where fellas on the mic with 1 minute rhymes that don't come out right? They fight.
Around 1984, they attended a talent show and met someone called Dougie Fresh. Doug was super impressed by Rick's obvious skill and recruited him as a member of his Get Fresh crew alongside DJs Chill Will and Barry B. After joining the crew, Slick used the moniker MC Ricky D. Doug was notable for his extreme beatboxing skills, and Rick would rap over his beats with a fresh flow that turned rap completely on its head. His cadence, soothing accent, flow, and voice control helped gain the crew international success with anthems like The Show and La Di Da, which quickly earned him the title of hip-hop's greatest storyteller. By around 1985, Slick Rick was noticed as a rising star in hip-hop. Around 1986, almost a year after the singles had dropped, MC Ricky D, also known as Slick Rick, left the Get Fresh crew to pursue a solo career, joining Rush Artist Management and landing a signing deal to Def Jam. He was artist number 3 on their roster and dropped his debut album around 1988. The album was called The Great Adventures of Slick Rick.
The sound of Slick Rick is quite different from rappers like, say, LL Cool J and Run DMC. As a matter of fact, Slick Rick says if they don't watch out, they'll be left behind.
And it peaked at number 31 on the Billboard 200. Singles off the project include Teenage Love,
To your heart, and everything seems so great at the start. For she loves him, and he also loves her.
Children's Story, and Hey Young World.
Hey, most don't borrow. And if you smoke crack, your kids will smoke crack tomorrow.
The album eventually went platinum, and to date, Children's Story remains his highest charting single.
Once upon a time, not long ago.
Unlike a lot of rappers nowadays who try incredibly hard to be gangsta, Slick chose to portray himself as a ladies' man who could be both funny and insightful. His image was unique. He had a British accent, he wore a lot of jewelry, and he had an eye patch, making him a standout star in the industry. Now Slick Rick was known for wearing a lot of chains. At any given time he was decked out in thick gold chains and bubbles, and would occasionally wear a gold crown in reference to his nickname Rick the Ruler.
And this was also the biggest one they had also in the store in Chinatown, the same place that had this one. Fuck it, I got both of them.
But this is where he ultimately began having problems. Newly rich, making poor spending decisions and buying flashy cars and real estate made him a target of the kind of attention he did not want. Living by myself, making records, and my name already being known all over the place, I felt I would need a little protection of some sort. Thus, when his first cousin, Mark Plummer, arrived in New York around 1989, fresh off the boat from Jamaica, Slick hired him as a bodyguard, a decision he would later regret. It turned out his cousin wanted easy money and drug connections rather than work, and started trying to extort the rapper for money. Eventually, Slick fired his cousin and gave him $3,000 and a van as severance. Unfortunately though, Rick's problems had only just began. The severance package was not enough for his cousin, and eventually Slick Rick was getting robbed. People came to his house, tied him up, beat him and pistol whipped him before robbing him. On another occasion, he came home to find bullet holes in his door. Then around 1990, he was attacked by people he recognized as friends of his cousin. They shot 20 shots at him, hitting him 3 times and sending him, a female passenger, and a man standing nearby to the hospital. With his girlfriend, Lisa Santiago, pregnant with his child, Slick became increasingly paranoid and feared leaving his house. He then bought a lot of weapons, and when Slick Rick finally confronted his cousin admitted to what he had done, but still demanded more money. Then around 1990, Slick Rick and his girlfriend, now 7 months pregnant, went out for Chinese food and to go shopping for their baby. Rick had all of his guns with him, and after they left the restaurant to get into the car, a super paranoid Rick saw his cousin coming out of a store. He then grabbed a gun and began firing out of the window, missing Mark with his first 2 shots and hitting an innocent bystander in the ankles. He managed to hit his cousin, but the man disappeared into a store. Realizing what he had done, Slick Rick sped off, leading police in a short high-speed chase. While trying to exit the highway, he misjudged the distance, crashing into a tree, breaking both of his girlfriend's legs in the collision. When they got to the hospital, both Santiago and Slick were arrested. Slick was indicted on 2 counts of attempted murder. He then pled guilty to all charges, and around 1991 he was sentenced to 14 months to 10 years in prison.
I definitely have remorse, I spoke to because an innocent bystander also got hit in the foot when I caught the case, you know what I'm saying? So me and him been on good terms now, you know what I'm saying? I spoke to him, told him,
After being bailed out by Russell Simmons before the indictment, Slick completed work on his second album, The Ruler's Back, around 1991. The album was not nearly as successful as his debut. It peaked at number 29 on the Billboard 200. It didn't earn any certifications and spawned the singles I Shouldn't Have Done It, Mistakes of a Woman on Love with Other Men, and It's a Boy.
Also, Rick, you told me you dedicated a song to your little baby boy.
Yeah, it's called It's a Boy. It's for my little Rick. It's Little Rick. His name is Little Ricky.
What's the flavor? His name is Rick too?
Yeah.
Little Ricky?
And that'll better be the first words. Just kidding.
The last song being a reference to his newborn son. Shouldn't Have Done It was the only song to chart, but by this time Slick Rick was back in prison. His incarceration completely derailed his career, and he would continue to pay for it over the years.
Right now I'm suffering. My son is suffering, you know what I'm saying? I could be out there. 5 years of my life went to waste, you know what I'm saying? So
not only was he unable to tour or promote his album, but his imprisonment also brought up the fact that he had not applied for citizenship, starting a whole nother string of court appearances and jail time. He spent 2 years behind bars for attempted murder.
What is a day in the life of inmate Rick Walters like?
let's see, get up about 7 o'clock, go to breakfast, come back 8 o'clock, go to work. I work at a steak shop in here.
But due to his exemplary behavior, he was granted work release privileges around 1993. This meant he was allowed to work at home and work on a new album while submitting regular urine tests. He made full use of his free time. Rick settled the civil lawsuits with both of his victims, but his cousin on the other hand was still a problem. After Rick's cousin broke into a house and sexually assaulted a boy, the boy's father shot him to death. Things were kinda looking up for Slick Rick. He no longer had to deal with his problematic cousin, but his relief was short-lived because about 6 months later, Rick was taken back into custody as the government informed him they were planning to deport him. It was a year and a half before his case even went to trial. In that time, album number 3 called Behind Bars was released to the public. It was his worst critical offering and spawned the singles Behind Bars, and sitting in my car.
Wears off, I don't bother. While she wanna kiss and then cuss her full of hate. Get a friend.
After Slick Rick returned to prison, he commenced a long back and forth with immigration. He was seen by a judge around 1995, where he pleaded his case. According to him, he couldn't leave the country because he had no family in London. He also had a son born in New York and insisted he was a changed man. I know I give off the impression like a gangster image, but that is not the person as was in the shell. Within the shell is a person who made a mistake. I'm a better person today. I have responsibilities. You know, I'm ready to face those responsibilities as an adult. I know that the crime that I committed was drastic, and I know that at the time, I wasn't thinking on a right way of thinking, but I hope that you believe that I'm being sincere, that I'm a changed person. Along with his parents, grandparents, and cousins, who begged for Rick to be granted another chance, Slick had plenty of support from the fans. 6,000 fans signed petitions asking Slick Rick to be allowed to stay in the country. Even the pedestrian he had shot on accident vouched for his stay, although that may have something to do with the $150,000 settlement he got. By around 1995, he was granted a waiver of deportation, but immigration refused to accept it and appealed the decision. Because he had now spent about 5 years in prison, especially due to the case's constant extensions, he was not allowed eligible relief from deportation. The case dragged on for another 3 years, until Rick eventually stopped fighting. He was released from prison around 1997, and although he was facing deportation, no one ever came to force him out of the country. Everyone involved refused to comment on the situation, and seemed that they had chosen to turn a blind eye. No pun intended. After getting released from prison, Slick got married and had 2 children. He maintained a low profile and began working on his next album, to be titled The Art of Storytelling. The album came out around 1999 and became his highest charting offering to date, peaking at number 8 on the Billboard 200. Within 1 month of its release, it went gold and spawned the single Street Talking. He has featured in a handful of singles including I Like with Montel Jordan, and Got to Give It Up with Aaliyah around 1996,
This party is jumping till
Just Another Case with Crew, and The Art of Storytelling with Outkast around 1999.
Like that now, you better go get the hoe about your bag now.
He kept doing features, and around 2001 he appeared on a song with Michael Jackson and Jay-Z called Girls, Girls, Girls Part 2. Just when things were starting to look up, he fell into even deeper trouble. After the 9/11 attacks around 2001, America was looking for any reason to deport any illegal immigrants, and just 9 months later, they received their opportunity to do it again. Slick was on board a cruise ship docked in the port of Miami and had spent the night raising money for Tom Joyner's charity fund. This time around, he was woken by US Customs at around 7 a.m. and escorted off the ship, claiming there was something wrong with him re-entering America. Since he had stepped into international waters, he had deported himself, and by stepping back into America, he would have to be detained once again. Initially thinking it would be resolved in a few days, Rick was later informed that there was a warrant out for his arrest. He was then offered the opportunity to go to London right away, but he turned it down because he didn't want to leave his wife and children behind. A few days later, he was sent to another jail in Florida, where his old immigration case would be exhumed. He wound up spending 17 months there. The conditions in prison were pretty poor. It was overcrowded. There were no doors on the toilet. He had to wear 1 dirty jumper a week, and his eye patch even began to disintegrate, and he was not allowed a new one until it was prescribed by a doctor, so he stopped wearing it. Slick's wife then began to prepare for a life in London. She packed up their stuff and flew to Britain, where she stayed in a hotel until she could find an apartment. Meanwhile, a Free Slick Rick campaign took off. Will Smith and Russell Simmons both wrote letters to the government on his behalf. His lawyers filed 4 separate appeals. And after a while, after Judge Kimber M. Wood looked at his case, Slick Rick became free once again. Now, because America was always trying to deport Slick Rick, his career suffered tremendously. He then spent time as a landlord, owning a couple of buildings in the Bronx, where he spent his time maintaining them and looking after his families.
Tell me, what's it like? What's your day-to-day life like right now? You know, what's the average day for you right now?
Well, being out here right now, I'm just having fun, you know, making my records, you know, taking advantage of the situation. So, you know, I get them papers, take care of business, you know, got kids and all that.
These days, Slick Rick spends most of his time changing light bulbs, taking out the garbage, and taking care of the 3 family buildings he owns in the Bronx. He continued to feature and play at benefits, but this drew too much attention to him, and around 2006, the Department of Homeland Security began a new attempt to get Slick Rick deported and moved out of the country. Do you see the logic now? We're talking about something that happened 16 years ago. I've spent more time fighting immigration than my actual crime itself. I've spent more time in prison for not committing the crime, but for fighting to stay in America. Eventually, around 2008, New York Governor David Peterson granted Rick a full and unconditional pardon on the attempted murder charges. The governor was pleased with Rick's behavior, but still, he could not return to music. One of his last appearances for almost 10 years was in 2007's Hip Hop Police with Chameleon.
Funny. Putting people in a hearse, what I heard from. Where were you the night of April 21st, son?
And so, Slick Rick mostly retired himself from music. He went on to earn royalties from his many times his song was sampled, plenty of which went on to be major hits, and he did perform his old music, but he didn't drop anything new. He kept doing features here and there, and around 2015-2016, he was finally granted US citizenship. This new development motivated Slick Rick, and around 2018-2019, he dropped a couple of singles. In essence, there were 2 major events or things that held Slick Rick back in his career. One was his cousin, who always demanded a handout from him and caused him to fire a gun. And the other thing that held him back was being in the US illegally. Despite this, Slick Rick is goated, he still tours, and drops singles from time to time. His most recent single was called Metropolis and came out around 2022. On Spotify, he has 1.3 monthly listeners, and his most listened to songs are Street Talking, Children's Story, Behind Bars, Sitting in My Car, and The Roots of All. That's it for me, it's your boy Ali. What happened to Slick Rick in your opinion? Let me know down below. Video requests? Be sure to let me know down below as well. Knew would happen, 2 video dropping soon. Also add me on Instagram at Ali Talks Music. Till next time, peace. Perfect.